Teddy says Steve Price's git of the year. That's a bit harsh, isn't it? I mean, it's not his fault. Oh no, it's his fault because he was the coach, isn't it? Let's start with Warrington, because if we talk about Wigan and Leeds, we're just going through an endless spiral of Leeds of great stuff, which we'll come to. But Hull KR are great, and we're not going to take anything away from Hull Kingston Rovers because they obviously were superb. Everyone loves Tony Smith. Everyone loves Jordan Abdul. Karsten loves Jimmy Kynors because he's German. Mikey Lewis is obviously brilliant.
Well, I think Mikey Lewis's touch of brilliance summed up the difference between the teams and the approach of the respective coaches. That Steve Price seems to play system. So he gets people in that can play a certain way that he wants to play, which is no risk predominantly, or low risk. Doesn't exactly encourage players to do anything unless they are in the right part of the field. Whereas Tony Smith, the beam on his face when Mikey Lewis saw what was available, backed himself.
Did he play what he saw with the old chip and chase?
All of the...
all of them.
All of them apply. But what he did was Tony Smith encourages his guys to take risk, manageable risk, and there's another side to taking risk, and that is if you make a mistake, you've got to be good enough to prevent the opposition from capitalising on that. But what he wants to do is has a philosophy about how the game should be played. And in that one moment, and I think at 12-0, the pressure from 1955 hit all the Warrington players. But that 12-0 was, we've got to score at least twice, possibly 3 times. And at the moment, we don't know how to catch and pass a ball anymore. That shot of Lewis seeing what was available and pulling it off. And let's face it, if he hadn't got the bounce of the ball and caught it, he would have still been surrendering it in the right part of the field, or they could have got a drop out. He saw that there was something on, was it the second or third tackle of that set? And he went for it and it came off for him, and we all leapt out of our seats, and Tony Smith beamed and looked at... I wonder what Lee Breers thought as part of a coaching staff that he's now leaving, where he could see for the 3rd year running they were playing at home in the playoffs, and the weight of expectation was weighing so heavily on those Warrington players that they started playing uncharacteristically, whereas Mikey Lewis, the young, fresh-faced, impudent halfback who's had to bide his time and learn his trade, but was thrown in and given the opportunity, is coached by a guy who every day in training will say, if you're going to do it to our advantage, not disadvantage. And then said, right, you've done it on the big stage, it's come off for you. I'm really, really pleased for you.
Because I am not a wordsmith, I'd call him mercurial, because that's what you call halfbacks. But you come up with a load of words there. Gareth Walker in the paper today call him a virtuoso effort. A throwback to halfbacks of years gone by. It's what people want to see. They want to see halfbacks have a go.
Deserved to win a game. It won a playoff game. It deserved to. But it again exemplified the difference in philosophy between Wigan and Warrington, and to a lesser extent Leeds, although Richard Agar clearly is of the Tony Smith school and has a philosophy about encouraging attacking rugby, and Tony Smith himself, and it's fantastic.
I think it'd be harsh if I said Hull KR have got some players who've been discarded elsewhere, but they have got players who've been discarded elsewhere, like the likes of Will Dagger, who had lots of hype at the start of their career, George King, who's gone from Warrington to Wakefield and now to Hull KR, which is probably a sideways move and actually an upwards move as it turns out in the end. But they were superb, they were entertaining, and
their scrambling defence was magnificent, which again, all of the teams that have got through this weekend have had commitment in their defence.
We were talking before we came on about sometimes it's difficult to get into a game if you haven't got an emotional involvement in it, which is why people might not have enjoyed Wigan versus Leeds on Thursday, because it's 2 teams no one likes, so
Agreed.
There's no underdog in there, obviously there is in a betting sense, but in a sense of no one likes Wigan, no one likes Leeds, so you want to see a draw, can't have a draw, so it's rubbish. Whereas at least in this one, Warrington, we can all laugh at them because it's not their year again. Hull KR, unless you're from Hull, you can get behind because they are the underdogs and they play nice rugby league. The 1955 thing, is Darryl Powell the man to be able to break that? Because this seems to be a thing that's going to go on and on and on until they finally do.
I don't know, but I just think under Darryl Powell, Warrington will play a more attractive style of rugby, and if they are going to break this hoodoo, I think the shackles have got to come off. Now we can judge the Steve Price era because it's come to an end, and I think you look at where the team were when he arrived, where they are when he leaves. It's pretty much the same. I don't think he has taken them to another level, but even listening to the Sky commentators, some of the decisions they've made to buy people like Greg. I'll be honest, I could not understand Warrington's team selection. I don't know how you can necessarily go into a game where at some point you might need someone who can change it off the bench without Blake Austin. I just thought he had to be there. I don't understand how when Matty Ashton had played so well the week before that you would put him on the bench and then leave him to come on when he's cold in an atmosphere where the game has almost gone and expect him to turn it around. I would have started with him. He deserved to start, and if that meant Ratchford displacing somebody else, then I think that's what they should have done. They didn't have a replacement hooker. They didn't have Danny Walker on the bench, which again has made a difference. It gives you a little bit of variety when you can take Darryl Clark off and put somebody else on in that position who does it a little bit differently. I did not understand the Warrington team selection, and I don't think you can just say, because Mike Cooper didn't play, that had a huge effect.
We should have got sent off the other week then.
So I think that came back to haunt Steve Price. He looked very conservative in the team that he chose, and I do think that this 1955 thing is going to haunt them, because you have to have a certain mentality within the players to get over the fact that the people in the stadium start holding their breath because they're worried that yet again it's going to happen. Yeah. And Stefan Ratchford, who's been brilliant this year, had arguably his worst game, his least influential game. Gareth Widdop, nominated as Man of Steel, could not put his stamp on the game. George Williams is another classic example of, late in the season or relatively late in the season, we will buy someone who is available, we will put them straight in the team, but they haven't yet fully attuned to what you want out of that team. Didn't influence the game.
Do you think he's just dropped Austin because he's leaving?
Well, I think they've brought Williams in and they're investing in him for next year. So, but I just think when you get to the pointy end of the season,
I don't want to say business end.
No, it's contractually obliged to say. You have to have variety on the bench. Yeah. And the other thing I couldn't, just relating it back to Wigan, who clearly we don't want to talk about because it's such a dour game, worst game ever in the history of rugby league. Their only method of changing the way they played was to bring on Kai Pearce-Paul, because he's different to everything else that they've got, and he has got a fabulous offload game and the ability to break down a defence that people won't give a lot of credit for, but Leeds' defence was pretty good that night. You needed something different, but Pearce-Paul didn't come on until something like the 61st minute.
Sean Wayne's a fan of his, isn't he? I think. I think I saw the quote. I was invited. I wasn't in the England press thing this week because I was working, so I missed it. But I saw the stories coming out of it. Like, he's impressed by Kai Pearce-Paul. So maybe he'll be in the World Cup next year. Maybe in the England night.
I think he'll be England night.
I think the internationals this year.
But I genuinely think that if you are going to win a semi-final or a playoff game and it's moving away from you, you have to put somebody on that is going to change it. For Leeds, and again, we're not talking about the worst game that's ever been played. Michalewski coming off the bench had a massive difference, particularly in his second spell. He got them going forward, and it was just different to the mix that they had out there at the time. And for me, Wigan and Warrington got what they deserved on the basis of the fact that they weren't adventurous enough to go any further.